My sister, a very talented, amazing musician, would tap and play music on my head, and then she'd make me tap the same music back, or she'd sing a little phrase or something and get me to sing that back. So we played these games, and it was very natural, but it was designed. She had a lot to do with raising me in that I was born extremely premature and struggled to get in, and so she had a great deal to do. She was a student at Juilliard. One of the most fun times in my life, again, was with my sister when I was just really little. I have no idea really how young, but I know it was, probably around 3, 4, maybe 5, the oldest 5 years old. And she would play these musical games. Well, we would go to the big radio console, the size of a refrigerator back in those days, and listen to live from Carnegie Hall, the New York Philharmonic. And she would, and she would get out score paper, musical score paper, and just like the game she would play on my head and the tunes she would sing, she said, well, now this is pictures of those sounds. So she'd have me draw out scores, actual musical scores of the symphonies and of the things and of the themes, and I thought this was just natural, for people to, that's just, and so I was actually writing, because of listening to the songs. I knew how to score before I was, old at all, and it was all natural. The problems came when I was put in educational systems, and they were so slow, and they took me back, and I was surprised that people didn't know how to do these things already, And education did help me. There's no doubt that it did. But it did make it difficult for me to become intuitive again. And so I think that over the course of my life, I've come full circle. You might call it senile, but senile is maybe, I like the river in Egypt. But coming full circle to the child, I've only stayed in contact with my music as to my ability to stay childlike with it and not become adulterated. Knowing that I was a musician is very, very different than when it was that I was making music. At 2 or 3 years old, we had recordings on an old machine that would actually cut records. And I was doing, at 2 and 3 years old, zippity-doo-dah, zippity, so it was very, very natural, my development. But by the time I started actually really getting into the piano, that was knowing that this was something I was going to be doing.
Talk to me about piano.
Piano. Almost the beginning and the end of, this is what I did. And it was like you come home from school, you can make your 4-gram cracker butter things, and then you go practice. And okay, I will. But I was reluctant, except for the fact that 5 minutes into it, I was into it. And I practiced an hour and a half every day as a child and loved it. Loved it.
Slow in starting, but once you started hearing the notes, you were captivated?
Oh yes, it was way beyond notes. Notes are the smallest part of music. And to define what it is just like impossible. If you could, we wouldn't need music.
You said that notes is the smallest part. What's the greatest part of music?
Oh, how you play that note, what you project through that note, what you feel through that note. If you don't love a note thoroughly before you leave it, you have no right to play another note.
Do most musicians understand that?
Well, if they're musicians, they're not abusing the term musician, then yes. I mean, how can a note connect to another one? It's the space between the sounds. If you don't have a thought for how this note is that you're going to play and how it connects to the other one before you play it, it's too late. It's too late. And there's too much music made that rushes by so quickly that, okay, I did that. And then yet nothing really happened to the soul.
So you're constantly thinking ahead.
Yes. I'd rather put that as, if I'm deeply into the sound, I'm not even thinking. The sound takes me to itself. I don't play the sounds play me. And then they have a chance of being really real and can be reflected in another person.
You're just a vessel for the music?
Absolutely. Kissing the face of now. No need for a dream to tell me time is real. For eternity touches me directly, leading me blindly into greater sight, keeping still a fretting mind that thinks to see less than what is. And so of awe, these moments made polished arrows concealed in my quiver, the pulling of the bow, singing strings plucked by fingers simply letting go, the arrow unfearful of its target. There is no understanding of this song, save for the trail of colored sparks left dancing through the sky, and even they best be left alone, so as to still this moment where he enters asking to be seen. And in this case, music, as it enters, you have to be still to hear it. And you can't decide what it's going to be. Okay, one more poem. Deep inside a sound, I found a special home where subtle sound explosions never end, where peace becomes the answer to no questions asked, where love's flow fully covers every soul. I don't have to know. Love's in control. Love's buoyant bubbles break my surface with a smile as joyous winds give rise to anxious wings. Let kite strings break in search of higher heavens. Sing songs of silence to the unseen wind. Come fly with me, within, without. Come fly with me, no fear, no doubt. Come sigh with me your own sweet air within this moment, our souls laid bare, open to the time of now. Together we can laugh somehow, accept the moment's sacred power. On sound-stretched wings we'll reach love's tower.
It's amazing to me that you can remember those beautiful words, and it's so much a part of you.
That's why if a person can't remember something, it's because they really weren't there at the time. I'm trying to disappear. I'm trying to disappear so that can happen. Because as long as I'm making the decisions, I'll only make them to a certain level. And that's the extent to which what I'll go. But in case, like often, like on a large synthesizer that I love, I like not knowing what the numbers are on it, so I can just push one and see if something comes out of that. And in my mind, I'll go, oh, I wouldn't have chosen that because it's not very safe. But in your defenselessness, your safety lies. If you don't take a chance on notes, I mean, the mistakes become an integral part of making something sound really good musically. I mean, make the same mistake twice, and now it's part of the plan, supposedly. Or so the courage to not have to know that these are the notes that you're going to play. As a classical musician, on the other hand, it was always, I played Mozart and Bach and Prokofiev exactly as to what the score was. And that was very satisfying because there was a great amount of artisticness built into that thing by these great composers. And it was always still within the moment that you could shape phrases and feel them deeply. And only when I would become occupied with, oh, there's 1,000 people out there hearing this now, and oh, this is so complex. The only way to get out of that was to go to the love. Go to the love of that you love this, and then it will fall into place, but only because you've done your work. It doesn't mean that you're just throwing something out there, even though at times that's a very good thing to do. If I sound contradictory, is because to even my own plans, it's because again, when I silence myself and my own authority for this, that's when I get the so-called miracles to happen. And I go, wow. And so what I'd like to tell people is that if they don't get it or something, well, you're going to hear a lot of mistakes in my playing. But sometimes you're going to hear some magic happen. Again, placing names or entities or this or that to it stops the process. This is as mystical as it sounds. And the beauty of sound is that it reaches into the heart before the mind can categorize it and tuck it into some neat file cabinet. This is an important part of it. And it's taken a lifetime to get that through, and I have no idea where the end is. And in fact, I believe that I draw things from the future into the present, not taking the past into the present, but more of a what if, or do you think this would go with that? Let's find out. And let's do it in front of all these people, because that creates a pressure under me that if I didn't have that pressure, I wouldn't be as experimental in this. Or my experimenting would not have the results it has. The tank drum is an example. I love using the tank drum. This has been recently discovered by me. And I like it because there's not so many reference points to this. Not that many people have heard this. And if you start with just one sound and let it listen to the vibration of one, yeah, from the first year that I started taking lessons from an amazing teacher, each year I would give a whole solo recital. And, usually made up of Bach and kind of Haydn and Mozart and so on, that would cover a variety of things. And I found that I did well under pressure. I did well. There was a certain musicalness that came about during that time that was evidently a bit unusual, and so it was just natural. Well, about the time that I quit being in the educational systems, because students would come to you and you'd teach them and so on, and you'd educate them into places. But then when I completely got out of that, what do I do now? And one of the first things that I actually did was, I bought a piano, and in the place where I bought the piano, they said, this place needs a commercial. I can do that. I said, well, I didn't realize what that was, but 300 commercials later, at least, of all original music, that I had to go every style there was. And this was fun. And I got to, I got to make up all sorts of interesting jingles, with music running through your mind. You really ought to take the time to catch a note or two and hold it for a sound. And don't forget where good songs meet, and so on, all sorts of, and so I got to create images, and sometimes I had to go country, and sometimes I had to do a sophisticated jazz thing, and yet I was a classical musician. So I'd listen to Oscar Peterson and go, oh, I can't do that, but I really like these chords he uses here, and I'll do a few of those. So and no longer, well, are you a pianist or are you a guitarist? And no, I'm a sound chaser. And that means anywhere I find it. Driving a car out along the Columbia one day, I almost ran into this big piece of metal on the road. And I thought, I'm going to go back and get that. So, and I strung it by piano wire up and played with it with knives and things to make sounds on it and put these into recordings I was doing. And found it's very interesting to be a sound chaser and stop trying to identify yourself as a guitarist or a pianist or a keyboardist or whatever. You're a musician that hears things in sounds, and you listen so carefully to them that you find that all songs play within a single note. You can play one note and realize that that note is made up of hundreds and hundreds of vibrations. And yet you can hear the difference if one vibration is off. You're not sitting there counting them. It's not analytical. But it resonates from somewhere inside that you just pay attention to that. Well, after I'd finished my Bachelor of Music degree, I had an immediate teaching job waiting for me in a little boarding school up near Spokane, to be specific, Upper Columbia Academy in Spangle, Washington. And they had a beautiful music building, 3 stories high. This is a little school of only 230 people. But they didn't do a lot of athletic sports with other schools, and so music was very important to them, and they excelled in this. And so I rushed into teaching academically, like you would after you're taught to do this way. Made a lot of mistakes about how to teach, but learned more and more that the student was where you started. Not with your agenda about what you wanted to teach them, but where are they? And what is it that they'll respond to? And I really enjoyed that. And got some pretty excited students that did really well. So I think it's an incredibly honorable profession. I'm just glad I broke the habit of being a teacher, because it's like until I physically stopped telling people they had to put their 4th finger on B flat over and over and over, I became unconscious of that's what I was doing, and it became a more natural process. And so that led to doing music more instinctively, and led to just many, many discoveries. A lot of failings, because if you're going to take chances, they're not all going to work. But that's part of the process of discovering something new. This little piece of river cane is rather amazing. I was one time trying to buy a flute, some expensive flutes that were really nice, and I did. But I found this up on a wall, sitting there, and I said, what's up there in that? Oh, they're really just little pieces of river cane. And I said, well, can I get one? And yeah. And so it was inexpensive, but it just, my wife calls this the spirit flute. And it has a beautiful soul to it. And I sometimes go up in the hills, a lot of the times actually, and listen to the meadowlarks. So, I learn songs from the birds, and I'm amazed how they answer back. And but it's also a beautiful, just musical instrument too. This flute, for instance, answers a question that I asked one time about life. And I had just been in a nursing home where I saw a lot of people that were, just not going to live much longer. And I panicked over it. Just, wait a minute, this just isn't forever, what I'm doing. So I ran out and sat down on the lawn, and there were these birds just flying down through the wind. And I noticed how free they were, and yet how skilled they were. And I wrote, what will I do with each breath taken in? Like snowflakes in the sun, the seconds melt and life is done. Just now I saw a bird in flight. He dipped and dived and flew down unseen corridors. Would we confine the magician of space to a single place? The golden bird of truth to a gilded cage? And so yeah, and I think about, what would I do with one breath? I can't imagine doing more beauty in one breath than through some flute like this. Even though my breath isn't what it was, here's one breath, just one breath. So there's the answer. What will I do with each breath taken in? What kind of beauty can I express, or how beautiful life is, and can I have others feel that? And evidently, yes, you can. This is another one of my favorite things that I found, and it's a version of the African thumb piano, kalimba, only in this case, this is a sansula because of the resonator on the back. And this is very soothing to people, let's say, in a hospital setting, which Van Cliburn, I was in my studio and talking to me.
Really?
Yeah, and I played a Beethoven piano sonata for him, and he shook his head and said, he said, I'm just a great success story. We're in an epidemic of great pianists. And he tried to include me in it, and I was like really floored. If I had to pick one in determining an impact in my life, the great Hungarian pianist Lily Krauss. She was the chairman of the Van Cliburn International Competition, and I was asked to come perform at their workshop that was a week long in Fort Worth, Texas, at Texas Christian University. We didn't know each other, but I was, of course, nervous when I was going to play for her, but when I played for her, and she asked me about how did I come up with the interpretation of this, and she shook her head and she says, that's my interpretation of it. And we developed this bond very, very quickly, and she was so powerful in taking a person to whatever level that they were at and just nudging them slightly into a new realm. And she just would keep saying, damn, you have good ears. You have good ears. And that was her definition, by the way, of where clinicians would ask her, will you tell us about technique? And how did you do that? And she would kind of sneer at them. I do this creatively. I do this musically. And finally she came up with a definition for what technique was. She said, I cannot tell you what good technique is. I can tell you what faulty technique is. She said, faulty technique is a difference between what you hear and what you produce. So it's all about the ear, educating the ear. It's like, what did you hear before you played the note? And were you honest to it? And if you weren't, why weren't you? And that really resonated with me. Teaching students to really get into the music after they've learned it. I mean, because the tendency is always, okay, I learned that piece, I want to do this one now. And it always kind of baffled me that they didn't get, well, now you're at the spot where you can let go of all that learning and all your mind, and of it, because now you've developed the neurological paths to play this, and now is when the music begins. It begins because now your mind has already comprehended the runs, and you don't have to think about, I've got to put this finger here and so on. It's not, now your heart so you can sing. And until that happens, you really haven't produced what you're capable of. Why would you go to all this work to learn all this? You put in your time doing this. I'm proud of you for learning this. But now, this is where the fun begins. Well, since music, frankly, is not the profitable thing that, let it say, it used to be when I was ambitious doing all of these things, and creating hundreds of musical things, a lot of them sold, and I did okay. It's not about that anymore at all. Not at all, in fact. But I've asked myself that question in the last couple of weeks, just really seriously. And it has to do with beauty, period. Just beauty. And how honestly can you express it? And to what degree are you willing to do that? Why do it with the way that you did it before, too? If you did it that way before, isn't there something you can do that will even express that beauty more? But even more important than that is realizing that this affects people incredibly. And my work for ill patients, and let's say in like life care centers and in the hospital, I'm finding this so satisfying as a musician, more so than like 5,000 people applauding that I played the last movement of the Prokofiev Seventh Sonata with great gusto and all. To find that people who are no longer worried about whether the door is shut and they're in a state of transitioning between life and death, and you make this difference for them at this time, and you're able to sense them so intimately that you're not even playing, you're playing their heart. And this is just the most amazing reward for a musician you could ever have. I mean, I think all musicians should be granted that once or twice, if not, but I get to do this every week. And I'm finding that what that does, and watching what doctors and nurses can't even understand how I did this for a patient, and like they woke up out of a coma that they hadn't been able to get them out of. And this music and this sound is deeply connected to something I do not understand, but I do experience it. And my lack of defining it is perhaps why I experience it so much. This idea of any definition I give to this would be the limitation as to how far it could go. But I've seen and watched ill people become healed in front of me. At one time, I just figured, okay, you're kind of weird, Dan. This music is so powerful to you, and like, that it saved your life many times, and it's brought you back and healed you from various things. But I never realized until I really started playing week after week, year after year, in the hospital, that this music does these things for other people in such a way that I would be in disbelief if I didn't see it happening myself, where a patient will be in a coma and has been there for some length of time, and they've done everything to try to bring him out, and all the family is there and just waiting for the last moments. And I play certain sounds, and in several cases, this person has come out of a coma and has gone on and lived beautifully, and specifically said, "Oh, don't worry, children. Don't you hear this? This is where it is." And it's because of the beauty and the effort of trying to reach the vibrational frequency of a person. Realizing that everybody has a rhythm, a frequency that they emanate, And if I am quiet enough and make an effort to find that, I sometimes turn that frequency on to stabilization. I don't do anything to heal them. I only relieve them of their condition that they're holding against themselves. But sound reaches into a being and deep into a person before the mind has the ability to categorize it and void it of its strength. When sickness of almost any kind is visiting a person, whether self-inflicted, which are by various mental conditions that are not true, but they are things that maybe a person would rather have, they think, or something in despair is. I mean, haven't you heard the sound of a bird just simply make this little sound, and all of a sudden you forgot what your troubles were? You forgot, and just long enough to allow a twist of perception to allow the miracle of healing to happen. You know, so much sickness is something we hold on to. It's not really sickness, it's an inability to let go of that imbalance. Perhaps, at least that's what I find and see with people in music. A rough drill sergeant that's in a bed, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't know that he's gonna like this, but I'll give my heart to it anyway. And I'll play something, and he'll say, wow, I don't have that pain anymore. And hey, is there any way you can come back, you know? and you know, my nausea has gone away, you know? It's like, or watching, oh, this is the first time my father smiled all day. Well, you know, angels fly because they take themselves lightly. You know, relieving stress goes a long ways sometimes. And whether the mechanics of it, I have no idea. The results of it I've seen often. The experience of watching it happen has baffled me over a course of years. I have never gone into the hospital and played for a 3-hour time that I didn't leave the hospital 3 hours later healthier than when I went in. You can't give love away and not get it back. Often when people say, you are so talented, and I'll just sort of playfully say to them, oh no, I'm just really obsessed. And, you know, I like the idea of that I've been so obsessive about what this is. That's just another term for I cared more about how much beauty there was in a single note, to the point that I put lots of notes together that each of them had beauty and shape to it. And I would like to be known as, like, I heard him play and like, wow, I lost track of what was going on. And then I found myself there. Yeah, until you let go of yourself, you may not know where you are. And I would like that as a legacy, to know that I had somebody stop and was stimulated by some form of awe and wonder. Sparkling spots that star me out into space, bringing me back the songs I once tried to sing before I listened.